This video will show how to configure Node-RED to use OPC UA and log data to MySQL. So here we have a Raspberry Pi 3, which we're using for the Node-RED server as well as the MySQL database. And we're using a Wago PFC 100, which has an OPC UA server in it. And I've just have a RTD wired in for the analog input for some data that we can monitor. The first thing we need to do is configure our Raspberry Pi 3. So we're just installing the Node-RED MySQL libraries here with the npm install command, and then we need to install the OPC UA client as shown here. Then we can go ahead and start the Node-RED server with the Node-RED start command. And then we'll go into the eCockpit software, which is how we configure the Wago PLC with the OPC server. So you can see the IP address is 192.168.4.17, and here we've got the analog input with the RTD on it. I have another video where I actually set this up if you're interested to see more how this is done, but basically we just have one global variable that we're going to bring in with our temperature on it. So now we can open up our browser with our Node-RED, and we're just going to drop in the OPC UA browser node and point that to the OPC UA server that's running on the PLC. And then we need a little bit of code, so we're going to drop in a template to create a web interface on our UI. This is a real simple HTML, and in a minute here you'll see what we're going to use this for. Basically we need to get the path to our global variable, and this will allow us to browse the variables that are on the PLC. So open a new tab with the UI interface, and then you can select the objects you want to browse, and basically we're just drilling down into the application to find the global list, and that gives us the text that we need to extract that or subscribe to that individual point. So go back into the Node-RED developer, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the inject node. We'll just create a topic pointing to that string that we copied in the previous step. And what we're going to use now is the OPC UA client. In this case, we're going to pass that topic to the client, and we'll monitor it just with a debug. So we can go ahead and use the PLC's IP address for the endpoint, and we'll subscribe to this topic with a 1-second update interval. So when I click the RTD inject, that sends the topic over, and you can see the data coming in from the PLC. It's working really well. So what we'll do is we'll drop a gauge in for our UI. We'll tie that into the value coming in from the client, and we can format the text to round off to the nearest tenth of a degree C. And we'll also drop in a delay, which will trigger every time we deploy using this little checkbox here. So after 5 seconds, it'll automatically subscribe. We don't have to click every time. So we're just going to change the UI grouping just to make it look a little nicer on the UI. We'll create a group called data, and we'll deploy that, and we can go back to our UI, and you can see the gauge is now showing the analog value. So if I warm up the RTD, you can see it automatically updates the gauge. So now we'll add a chart node. We'll just tie that into the same data coming in, and put it in the same grouping, and we'll call this trend RTD. So if I deploy that, you can see that the trend automatically gets updated. The scaling is automatically adjusted as the temperature increases, which is kind of nice. So now we can set up the MySQL connection. So I'm just logging into phpMyAdmin that's running on the Raspberry Pi, and I just have a table called MyData with a timestamp and a degree C, which is a double. So if I go to the SQL tab, I can test different SQL statements. So basically we're just doing a simple insert. We're inserting 123.4. So if I go back and I query, you can see that numbers with a timestamp is being entered there. So that's the syntax that we want to use for this insert. So I'm going to use a payload of 99 for the test here, and then we're going to drop in a function. And basically all this function does is it takes the payload and uses that as the value to do the insert. So we'll just call this insert statement, and then you can see the code here. It's just a simple string that we're putting together with the value. So let's tie that into a debug so we can see and verify that the text looks good. If I click deploy, and click the button. Now you can see the insert statement matches more or less what we are looking for. So let's drop in a MySQL node, and we'll configure that to point to our server and the database that we're using. And then basically we just need to tie that in to our SQL statement, and we can test that. When we click the button, we should see a 99 in the table. So now that we know that our insert statement is correct, we can tie the OPC client right into this block, and that will take our temperature data and log it to the database. So if I hit refresh, you can start to see the RTD temperature is being logged. There's a couple more points there. So our historian is up and running using all open source software, which is pretty neat. If I go to the UI, one last thing we can look at is the theming. If I choose a dark theme, it uses like darker colors and changes the look and feel of the UI, which is kind of nice looking. So this is a very easy way to utilize the OPC UA server on the Wago PLC and display all that on a web page and logging data into a open source historian. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to learn more about Node-RED, I have another YouTube video with a link here that you might be interested in taking a look at. Thank you.